All right,
Al's got the facials going.
That was.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you. I was all over that.
That was our intro to BlabberMouths. Today, people just found out it was Michael Jackson's birthday, so really cool going on, and I am super duper excited to have Val Brown in the house today. This has been something in the works for a couple months, which is really, really cool. I'm very excited that she is here. And of course, we have the other part of BlabberMouths who shows up for most of them, Mr. Andy Milne, Carmel Health.
Happy to be here.
All right. So Val, tell us a little bit about yourself before we start rolling.
Yes. All right. I was just replying to Kevin in the chat window. Man in the Mirror was actually one of our themes for the year in the classroom one day because we were talking about changing the world. Yeah. But just a little bit about me. I currently work in leadership development in my school district here in Central Florida. And prior to that, I worked in professional development. And prior to that, I was a classroom teacher. And in 2013, I was the district teacher of the year. Before that, I was completely against social media, but it was actually seeing my kids engage on Edmodo that inspired me, my students. And so I said, I'm going to try it. And then the rest is history. I feel like I've made wonderful connections via social media, and I'm glad to talk to you tonight.
All right, Andy, do we need to intro you, or should we just assume some people know who you are?
You can move on if you want. Hey, I'm just a cisgender white guy living in my privileged bubble, trying not to step on anybody's toes. So happy to get out of my comfort zone and talk about social justice as much as I can. The conversations can be awkward, so that's the best kind of conversation. If I don't have that awkward conversation, I want to have that conversation. So let's get it going.
Oh, it's going to get awkward today. People who are watching and listening, there's going to be some head shaking. Like, I can't believe that. But you bring up a good point. Before we even start, when we're approaching this subject, language is so important. And if you're not well versed in it, you could get yourself in trouble very, very quickly. I'm not saying that's happened to me, but that's definitely happened to me before. When I do things, I kind of jump in and say, hey, I'll figure this out as we go along. Yet when we talk about social justice, probably not the best idea. So today we're going to talk about what is an ally, what is the best path to being an ally once you get there and realize that it's important to you, if it is ever important to you. And I would say after tonight, you're going to leave hopefully thinking that it is. So when we get started, Val, why don't you tell us in your eyes, what is a social justice ally?
In my words, a social justice ally is someone who is in a privileged position, who stands up for someone who is not in a privileged position regarding various issues in social justice. The ones closest to my heart deal with the race and being a woman, because that's my identity as I am right now. But through other relationships where I've become allies, I feel like I'm welcoming them all, because if any of us is suffering injustice, then it affects all of us. And I take that seriously.
Absolutely. And it's kind of spot on with wherever website I went to go find the definition. It's this exact same thing. So one social group who is standing up supporting members of another group. The ally would be someone probably from the dominant group and standing up. And what's important in there is action. We talked about standing up. So we will go on tonight. And it's cool when we talk about amplifying and, doing your little clicks and retweets and hearts. And that's wonderful. But what are we doing with the change? Andy, what is your idea about being an ally?
It's funny because, I'd like to say that I'm an ally, and I thought I had the definition down pat, and then I heard Val's definition as well, and I find myself wrestling sometimes with the term ally because I read sometimes that being an ally can be deemed as too passive, and I'd love to get that conversation going at some point tonight. You put out a definition earlier, and you said it says the dominant group standing beside the member, and I don't know if standing beside is enough. I think coming from a position of privilege, you have the privilege, so you are more likely to have voice. So therefore, I think you do need to use it. So as much as I kind of embrace my allyship without wearing it as a badge, I do sometimes wrestle with the fact that is being an ally too passive? Does that make you a comrade? Does comrade make you too political? So I do worry overly about the term, but as you rightly said, it has to involve some sort of action.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, please do.
I think dialogue moves things, and I don't think that our definitions are far apart, right? So, but I think we wouldn't know that unless we talked about it. So if I am being an ally for, a Muslim friend of mine, that means what I believe I am doing is standing with them if they want me to do that, speaking on behalf of them, whether they are there or not there, or just listening. It depends on what is required of me at the time. I don't know that there's one way to do it.
Nice.
The dog agrees.
What do you and your dog have to say about being an ally?
Did you just ask me a question? I'm sorry, the dog barked, of course.
I did. I would like to know, what are your thoughts about what is an ally in the social justice realm?
I think that my perspective about it is similar to Val's, and I think that in terms of being an ally, I think you have to be what the person you are standing beside needs at the time. My perspective is probably somewhat unique because for personal reasons, one of the areas I feel strongly about is I have a daughter who happens to be transgender, and I feel called to stand up for her and for her friends, but that doesn't necessarily mean pushing myself out if she doesn't want me to. It means being the kind of support that she needs and that her friends need.
All right, so it's more about what the people who are close to you want than what your idea is? Is that what I'm hearing you say there?
No, I think being an ally for someone means doing what they need in that moment in time. It also means, I think, for me personally, I feel called to support other people that maybe are not having the same privileges that I have or having the same opportunities that I have. And for whatever reasons.
All right. Now you brought up privilege. So now let's talk about that, because I feel privilege is something that gets people a little agitated when they first. And I'll tell you my experience with privilege. I think I had the typical white guy idea of what privilege was when I heard it. I worked hard for my degrees. I put in time. I put in effort. I was up to 1, 2, 3 in the morning. I had my kids screaming. Why is my effort that I put in not considered, I guess, good enough when we were talking about privilege before I understood exactly what it is? So what would you say to somebody, and this could go to either Val or Pam, somebody who says, I worked really hard. Why are you trying to take away what I did? And can't other people just work as hard as I did to get where I'm at? Who wants to tackle that one first?
I don't think recognizing privilege means that you don't recognize that someone worked hard. I think recognizing privilege becomes an issue if you genuinely believe that it's fair for everyone, and it just pains to think that it's not fair for everyone, and in fact it's in favor of you. And so for whatever reason, that rubs people the wrong way. We all have privilege. I hardly ever have to think about where the ramp is to get in. I can take the stairs. I don't think about it. Am I thankful that we have access? Yes, obviously, but it's not something I had to think about. And I needed someone who didn't have the same privilege as me to bring that up. And my reaction, probably because I recognize that other people have privileges that I don't, was like, oh man, I'm so sorry I missed that. Let's make this so that you also have access as well. So they don't equate to me recognizing that you have privilege and saying that you didn't work hard. No one's saying that you didn't work hard. It's
kind of like if you support Black Lives Matter, then you're not supporting cops.
Right. That doesn't make sense. No, that is not the same thing.
Em, any thoughts on this?
I think that that saying that you have privilege does not discount the fact that you still have to work hard for things, that you still have to put effort into things. Privilege in most scenarios doesn't mean that you're getting handed things on a silver platter. At the same time, I think, and Val is really, the fact that we work together, she's really opened my eyes up into thinking about how each of us have different privileges set forth and how we don't even recognize it sometimes. I know there was an incident at work a few days ago when somebody made a comment and it didn't even register with me until she brought it up. And then I recognized that it was really inappropriate, but it didn't register to me because it's not something that I deal with on a daily basis. But to a Black woman, it was extremely inappropriate, and seeing it through her eyes made me really understand her perspective differently. And I think that's the same thing for lots of people, that we all get caught in our own little vision, our own perspective, and we have blinders on to what other people see and what impacts and affects them. And it doesn't discount that we're still going through things in our own lane, but we need to look at what other people are doing as well, or what their experiences are.
And I think this is where, when we talk about dialogue, that's huge. Because if we didn't have the dialogue, we would have no idea that was going on, because I have a hard time seeing inside myself.
Right.
And if I didn't have someone in my PLN who could sit there and say, you hear what this person said or this came up, I would never recognize that. It would just go right by me. So I do like that. Andy, what are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, just in the chat there on the side, I was saying I liked how Pam was saying that she was seeing it through a different lens, and I think that ability to see a situation through somebody else's lens is very powerful. I work with high school kids in a health situation. I teach health, so my students are only very much learning to do that. So I try and encourage that through advocacy actions and through a big advocacy project that we have in class. And again, I'm looking in the chat on the side here, and I like what Regina said about being Black is not a job that she can stop doing. That's something that's part of her identity 24/7. And I think that is a privilege that an ally can have at times. You can choose to be an ally, but you can fall back from being an ally, and yet the people that you're expecting to be standing alongside don't have that privilege.
All right, nice. So let's go on to the next part we have coming up. The next question: why do we need social justice allies in education? So why is this so important? Why are we doing this tonight? Why are we putting this out there? Why are Andy and I presenting this at conferences? What is the importance on there? We could start with Pam and then go to Val. Pam, why is it important that we have these allies out there in the education world specifically?
I feel like, especially as it pertains to teachers in the classroom, I think that the ability to recognize where our students are coming from and what impact their perspective has on their learning is important. And I think that sometimes we get too caught up in focusing on individual standards and content, and we forget that we have to teach the whole child in order to be successful. And so I can speak probably more forcefully from the perspective of a parent. And I know that for my children, when their teachers, their educators didn't understand their perspective, it really did hinder their ability to learn and be successful.
Yeah, I definitely think you're spot on with everything you said right there. And in the health of phys ed world, we love the whole child. We focus on the whole child. And that's where when I'm in these education chats with general ed teachers and I see everything so specific, I'm like, listen, I know your content's important and all, but you teach a child, a whole child. You're not just teaching social studies. You're not just teaching math or English. When they walk in, out there just for that 45 minutes that you're just concentrating on there. Val, what do you have thoughts on?
I struggle with the idea of an educator being an ally as like a plus one. That is the job you signed up for. You teach and advocate for children on behalf of children. You have to get to know children. You have to understand like what they're going through in order to provide the best education for them. And so that seems like a non-negotiable, a minimum requirement that you are able to look at the children that you're teaching. And again, we teach a diverse group of kids across all diverse labels that you want to give them. Knowing them and supporting them means being an advocate or an ally for what they're experiencing. It's hard for me to separate the two.
Yeah, and you're right. And yet, when we get in an interview, are there ever interview questions about that? Do we ever talk? Do you recognize your biases? What have you done to understand students who are not like you? I mean, very, very rare. I've been on numerous interviews. It's never come up once.
You're right.
All right, Dr. Martha James Hassan. Are you with us finally?
I'm finally with you. I apologize for my delay. And I've got some weird echoey things going on because I'm trying to hear you on my computer and hold my phone far enough away from my face that I don't look old and tired.
All right, so very briefly, can you tell us a little bit about yourself before I start asking you about the Imperfect Ally? So tell us a little bit of background about yourself and why this is so, why you feel so strongly about social justice.
Well, okay. I wish I could find a place to rest my phone. And I wish I had my headphones. So I apologize to everyone for being late. Background about myself. I am an assistant professor at Morgan State University, which is a historically Black college and university here in Baltimore, Maryland. I am also a commissioner on the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. So in that role, I am a member of a 9-member panel who basically create the policy, budgetary, and quasi-judicial functions for the 80,000 students in our district. But I came to my role in social justice very organically by being a teacher and understanding as an urban teacher that you needed to be that imperfect ally. And I screwed up allyness all the time. I said the wrong things. I did the wrong things. I would try and apply information that I'd gained from one genre or environment to another. And in realizing that, I realized that I was asking the people I was working with to do a whole lot of educating of me. And as imperfect allies, we have to stop looking at the Black and brown people and saying, you need to teach us. And we need to do more listening, and we need to do more understanding. And so in my tenure now, writing and researching about the role of African-American males specifically, but through physical activity, the role of urban children in general and their success in schools and how that's uniquely connected to physical activity, I've been able to connect with how do I then code switch this and create a theoretical framework for understanding diversity in a way that's more holistic and hopefully, in my personal opinion, because it's my life's work, will help move the needle forward for kids.
Huge. Now, I love when you talked about the imperfect ally. You're the first person I've ever heard say that. I am example, I guess, B, if you're example of what an imperfect ally looks like, making mistakes left and right. Why do we have to be considered imperfect allies instead of just saying it's okay to be an ally?
Because in all crudity, we're going to fuck it up. We're just going to do it wrong.
My kids. No.
A spade is a spade unless it's a heart, and then it's a heart. But because it's a journey, because what I found when I was in my K-12 career, which I spent 21 years in K-12 in urban education, was that the movement towards cultural competency training, which really predominantly happened around the stimulus package. So there was all this money that flowed into education. And urban districts said, oh, we should do cultural competency training. And within a very, very finite period of time, cultural competency training became a certificate to earn to put on your door, just like the safe space sticker. But yet LGBTQAI students were not safe in that room just because there was a sticker there. And cultural competency is not a terminal degree.
Sounds like you agree, Val.
Yes. Sorry.
So in my work, I decided that I needed to create this framework about being the imperfect ally, because if as a person of pallor, and I'll say that again in case anybody didn't get it, as a person of pallor, I cannot look at my people of color around me to tell me about ethnicity any more than I can look at religious minorities or differently abled bodies, gender identity, people who express differently. I can't look at them as constantly as my teachers. I have to listen. I have to be aware, and I have to understand what applies to another group. I could hang out with a whole bunch of African-American women in Minnesota. Doesn't mean I can code shift and apply those same things now that I live south of the Mason-Dixon. Certainly there will be some common threads because we have some human common threads. Certainly there will be cultural threads because we have the Great Migration. We have cultural influences of people going to college in different places and working in different places. But each genre is new. And so therefore, cultural fluency gives the idea of moving to a new genre is just like reading poetry or informational text. Neither is better, neither is worse, but it's a different decoding. It's a different automaticity that happens.
That lines up with what Dean Dudley was saying the other day when we were talking, when he was talking about literacy and physical literacy, and how when you move to a different place, you have to start all over again, whether it's a different language or a different thing. And that's
exactly. And then when you add code switching to that and teaching kids and adults to code switch without co-opting, it becomes another level altogether.
All right. So what I'm hearing you say is that people who are not like myself, and I'll use the white male since that seems to be the number one privileged person in America, I should not
able-bodied, white male, landed. You got a couple others too.
Heterosexual.
You're not feeling guilty enough.
There's a couple. Both our parents went to college.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of privilege
and
going
cisgendered.
Cisgendered. Andy got it. We could go down the list. I believe
and
me.
you got a hell of a dollhouse.
Yes, that dollhouse is there. So
probably got some money.
I've got a lot of help. That was donated, but S Nation is a donation. but I've definitely had a lot of help in my life and been set up for success by a lot of outside forces, not just myself. So Pam, you've been silent for quite a while. Can you tell us your journey and a little bit about your daughter, how that came about and how that opened your eyes and changed the way you taught as well?
Well, my daughter is actually one of a set of triplets. And she was always very, very bright and very, very sweet. And when she and her sisters went, when she and her sisters went to college, she came out as being trans, and our entire family embraced her because you love your children unconditionally, and we love her unconditionally. And so we've kind of been going through this journey of her transition over the last 3 years. And this summer we spent most of the summer at the University of Miami Hospital, where she had her confirmation surgery, and seeing all the things that she's gone through, and she's really, really lucky. She's a student at our local university, and they have a very strong coalition for students with different gender identities and perspectives. And so she's made a lot of really good friends there. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to attend a few events with some of her friends. And it breaks my heart because the other kids will come up and thank me for supporting her and them. And it's so sad to me that particular population of children don't really get a lot of support. I also know that there's at least one student in our district who has struggled and come to teachers for support, who happens to be transgender and is not getting support from their family. And so those kinds of questions, I want to be an ally for those children, and we're kind of caught in this hard place where we can't supersede what the parents' support looks like. So, it's an area that I want to do more with. I'm just, as an educator, I recognize the needs of those kids. And I think we need to reach out and make learning a safe place for them. At the same time, we're kind of caught in this whole political the way that policy and politicians, and there's a lot of other factors that involve our ability to support that particular population of kids on our campuses.
Now, what did you do to support them? Like, were you involved in that before your daughter came out, or did it do that? And then how did that move you to something?
To be honest, before my daughter came out, I wasn't super aware of that many trans kids, at least not in our schools. I've always taught my kids to be really open and support everyone and those kinds of values. And as a teacher, I've always supported kids no matter what, but I've never had any kids, come directly to me.
Nice. Val, anything to add on there? I know.
I will say that Pam has allowed me to be an imperfect ally in her journey through the transition. And she's helped me learn proper use of pronouns, when to use them, how to use them. And in that way, I want to address it's not the other person's responsibility to teach you. I agree with that. It's not my responsibility to teach you everything. However, in order for you to flourish as an imperfect ally, you do need an ally to help you get through that. And so Pam has been that for me, where I can make mistakes in front of her and she'll gently get me back on track. I can ask questions where I'm completely vulnerable because I don't know. And as she mentioned, prior to her daughter's transition, I didn't I didn't have any personal experience. And so I didn't know what I thought. And so when you're coming from that just complete place of ignorance, you do need someone who is willing to gently get you on the right track and or share some information if you're willing. I think it starts with, though, you have to have a willing spirit in order to be an imperfect ally. Like if you're just being a jerk and you're just asking questions that are just
nosy,
then that's, we can play that game some other time. But if you genuinely want to know how to support a particular population and you don't know where to turn, I think if you don't turn to someone in that population, you're doing a disservice. You're just making assumptions, or you're just reading and thinking what's going on, when in actuality you need to form a relationship with someone to be an imperfect ally.
Nice. And yeah, it all comes back to relationships. You have to have that relationship with somebody, or else it does come off as you're callous or you just are nosy instead of really wanting to better yourself, which is why this is going to be my favorite question and the last question of the evening of what are some obstacles on the road to imperfect allyship. And I will start this one off with a little journey of myself and kind of how Val and I connected a little bit on there. So on Twitter, I have one of these, I guess I mansplain. I don't know. I just jump in. I don't care. I just read it and I go for it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to jump in and learn. I've been like that pretty much my whole life. And I could take getting knocked down. I'm not too worried about it for the most part. So when I first realized what privilege kind of was and that there was a problem, and I'm seeing all these people chatting about different things. And I want to, if I see a lot going on, I want to know what's going on, whether I could agree or disagree. I want to know. And I made that classic misstep of not lurking first. I not just shut my mouth and listen. I mean, to give you, I was in a book club with Franz Davis and no idea about social justice. And I'm asking these, now that I look back, dumb old questions that she must be like, what is he going on? I mean, it was crazy. So I guess the first thing from my point, and then we could open it up, is when you decide that being an ally is important, and an imperfect ally, which I love, is important, something we need to be as educators. The first thing is close your mouth, get rid of every argument that's going to pop in your head, because you're going to have a rebuttal for everything. There's going to be, but when somebody's talking, and instead of looking at it as an argument or a debate, look at it as a learning experience and just take in what they're saying, because they're going to give you their point of view. Nothing I'm going to say is going to change their mind. It's just going to make me look dumb and have me bang my head against the wall. So I guess for me, the first step, if this is an avenue that you would want to go on, is find your people, find your hashtags, whether if you're going to do it on Twitter, which I'll get on my Twitter rant later. But if you're going to go to your Educolor or Center of Black Children to college or wherever you're going to find these conversations happening, just lurk, just read, and really try to take in their point of view. Val, we'll go to you next. What would you say for your road with Pam? Where were the roadblocks there? And what were the struggle?
I think just with in general, whatever issues or whatever the issues you have personally, you have to overcome, and you do have to just be quiet. Just like take a moment and just don't say anything else and listen to what someone says, because you cannot convince someone that that's not their reality, especially when they have multiple experiences of it happening. And so, with the situation that Pam talked about, if I would have told her that, 3 years ago, she probably wouldn't have thought anything about it. But because we have been on this journey together, like beginning to see things from her perspective, and that's a choice that she chooses to make whenever she's listening to me. Same thing with the journey with her daughter. I had to choose, and it was the choice was pretty simple. If this were my child, what would I want for him or her? I have a son and a daughter. What would I want for them? And it's the exact same thing. And I think that's fair to ask of teachers who work with children. If this was your child, what would you want for him or her? Because they are your children while they're in your care for the part of the day. So I think, like you said, just being quiet for a little bit, making the choice every single time to listen from that perspective, because it's easy to disregard someone's feelings because it's not your reality. Like you said, we can get in our blinders on and say, well, that's not really how it is. Well, this is actually how it is for me every day. And so respecting that and knowing that it's going to take a while for you to get to a place, like you said, we're on this journey for the long haul. And I think that's important to know.
Pam, what about your journey? What were some roadblocks that were going on with your journey?
Well, I think in terms of my journey with Val, I think that what she's taught me is to, as she already mentioned, to be a better listener. And also, I think I came into our relationship as friends with a certain perception. And I think we all do, we have those first impressions, and everybody talks about how first impressions are so important. And sometimes I think we do that with students as well. We come in with a first impression and we let that take over our interactions with our students, with our colleagues. And so we kind of close ourselves to really listening and really looking at a person's perspective. And I think that can be really detrimental. Especially in terms of trying to be an ally with someone. With my daughter, I had to learn, and I still have to learn. I love the whole, being poster children for an imperfect ally. I still make mistakes. And she very patiently and lovingly, without, making me feel bad usually, reminds me of what her perspective is, and what's okay to say and what's okay not to say, and what kinds of support she needs. And I think Val does the same thing. And I think sometimes we kind of fall back into wherever we came from. I know that our district happens to be a Marzano district, and so we spent a good amount of time studying some of his work. And I still remember a couple of years ago, and I was looking at when he was talking about prejudice and how we all come in with prejudice, and that it's a natural thing. It's not something that you can run away from or get away from, but it's what you do with that, and how you act. Like I always take the perspective that there are certain kids' names that I would never name my kids, because whatever child you had 10 years ago really drove you insane. So now you are prejudiced against that child's name because you struggled with that child all year. So as long as you acknowledge that and you don't do something negative with those feelings, I think you can stay open to listening. And so for me, I think this process is about being really open-minded and continuing to be open-minded to growth.
Yeah, and I have to say, for me, being the fragile self I am, you have to do it in a safe space. You have to have either somebody, if you're lucky enough and you have someone like Val or Pam at your school or Martha at your school that you could talk to, that's the best. Face to face, right there. I don't have anyone I can have these conversations with, so I decided to have them with the world through written text, which is a horrible way to do this. I do not recommend people use Twitter. And in general, I don't even like the race conversation. Even now, I kind of know what's going on, or gender, or any kind of debatable topic. I hate it on Twitter. It's a horrible way. You lose empathy with the written word so quickly. That's why I personally love my Voxer. Now I have the voice. I can hear the person. I can hear whether they're being mean or rude or inquisitive or what's going on. So for me personally, if you're going to take this road to allyship, to imperfect allyship. Do it in a safe space. So when you ask your stupid question, which we all have these dumb questions. And I have a lot of dumber questions because that's just how I think. So I really don't want to do that in a space where everybody can see it. So again, the smaller groups, direct messages, perfect if you're going to use social media. Voxer, perfect if you're going to use social media. Face-to-face, always the best. We always want that. And then at conferences, if it's an ed camp, bring it up at an ed camp. Anything is valid. If you have 3 people that show up to your room, that's a solid conversation right there that you would have never had before then. Martha, what do you have to say on this subject? If you're going to give advice to someone and ways they could be better at it.
First, it is all about love. It is all about relationships, just like a quality classroom environment doesn't happen if you don't know your kids. So taking time to learn who people are, understanding that you might get yelled at and that's okay, that to express job frustration is a privilege because somebody else might lose their job for saying that. To be able to find friends and colleagues that are like-minded is a privilege. Becoming, as Sarah said at her PE Institute keynote, becoming comfortable in the uncomfortable. So pushing the boundaries, but learning how to do that gently. I feel like this journey to allyhood is a little bit like becoming that non-smoker. And if anybody's known like a pack-a-day smoker who quits and they evangelize about the horrors of nicotine and you'll go through that just like any other racial identity theory. So first we discover our whiteness, then we discover what our whiteness gives us, then we cry about it as white women, then we go, okay, now what do we do with this privilege we know we have? How do we stop exercising it on people? But I'm not going to abandon my privilege. I'm not going to give up my doctorate degree, even though I know the door closed behind me. But how can I now leverage the privilege that I have? So example of the expecting to be yelled at piece. So shortly after you and I had one of our first conversations about this, and it is about being courageous. And let me just segue really quick. When school districts and things like that ask me to come out and work with them on cultural identity and cultural fluency training, my first question to them is, are you having courageous conversations about job performance? Because if you're not having courageous conversations about job performance, we're not going to get to race and identity and ethnicity and religion and able-bodiedness and gender, because you can't go there with job, then you can't go there with something else. So fundamentally, it's about being courageous in general. Looking at the person that shares the office with you and saying, you know what? I am working my arse off every single day to be the best physical educator I can. And you are being a quintessential mirror of why we shouldn't have physical education schools. Once we get that conversation off the ground, then this other one will be so much easier. But the example now that I come back to is shortly after our first conversation, I started seeing on Twitter about being a social justice champion. And my skin cringed, my eyes, I was like, being a champion means somebody else lost. It means, once again, leveraging privilege to be better than someone else. And I thought about jumping in and correcting, and I said, no, I'm an imperfect ally. I said the same sort of stuff. I'm saying the same sort of stuff now that I'm sure 5 years from now I will say, oh my God, you got online and said that out loud. But it's about learning and understanding that each of us do it at our own pace, based on our own experiences, with our own relationships, and that in order to build it quicker, the only thing that does that is tribe, is making our tribe as big and diverse and honest as possible. So it's creative conversations about job engaging, not as I went to the zoo to look at some people, or I went to the synagogue to watch people, but it's as in actual engagement.
You're good. You're good. Keep going. Stop.
Well, you know what? When I'm thinking about it, Justin, I don't know what made me reach out to you in direct message, except I could tell you were trying, and I didn't want you to stop trying.
Yeah, and that was huge. That was absolutely huge because I was getting bombarded on every side, and rightly so. I'm not even sticking up for myself there. Rightly so, because I'm jumping in, and I still do it to this day, where I have a conversation, and I don't. When I have the conversation, I don't realize that I'm talking to somebody who their gender plays a role in this conversation, their race plays a role in the conversation, sexuality plays a role in the conversation, and I don't think of any of this. I just look at what's written down or what's in front of me, and I go off of that. And you're missing a huge part of the person when you do that. And thank God you did that, because that, picked me up, because I was feeling super low that day. It was easy to see why. And just that little thing of somebody coming in and say, listen, don't give up. You're an idiot, but don't give up. Learn from your mistakes. And again, hopefully people could tell with the Imperfect Ally that your heart is in the right place, because it's easy for me to ignore it. I could be like half the other white males on Twitter who don't even talk about it because they know it's going to get sticky, because it might affect whatever project that they have in the future, or if they're going to be asked to keynote somewhere. So, hopefully when other people see this, they could do the same thing and jump in and say, hey, just keep it up. Shut your mouth. Learn a little bit. Go read this. Go visit this website. Internalize. If you have any questions, ask me on the side, which was huge, which I absolutely loved that. When Val said, if you have anything, just hit me up on the side. Really? Where no one else can see it.
That's right.
It'll be you and I having a conversation. And again, we talked about that before. All right. Any closing thoughts that you have here, ladies? Open floor. It could be about allyship. It could be about anything you want. If you have anything to plug, if you have a website or something people should go to, Pam, if you have a resource that people should go to learn anything you want, you guys, ladies, have 2 minutes starting now.
I'll just say, in terms of resources, there is a group that specifically supports allies of children who are transgender in schools, and it's called the Zebra Coalition. So that's a place that people can get more information, can read, can get materials to support them supporting the kids.
Nice. We will look into that. And Val, anything from you?
I just want to thank you for continuing to have the conversation. I think it's important to have these dialogue moves things. And I think the more we have these, the better our world will be. And it's important for teachers to have these uncomfortable conversations and grow from them.
Nice. We have Dr. Husan saying Bell Hooks, who does not capitalize her name, which is very interesting. I was just up on that. Another one, Education to Transgress. And the book that Dr. Martha James Hassan was one of the co-authors on, Social Justice and Physical Education. Highly recommend that book. That was a really good read. It broke it down by every group. Every chapter was a different group. There was gender, Hispanic, Black, LBGTQIA. I don't know. It was a lot of Canadian authors, so there was all kinds of letters in there. I didn't know. But a fantastic, fantastic book. And ladies, thank you very much for your time. The same thing I say at the end of everything I do. Time is our most precious commodity. The fact that you shared it with us, the phys ed teachers on the side, I appreciate you. And again, this will turn into a podcast. I'll put this on the YouTube channel. And this has waves. So you threw the stone in the middle of the pond, and now it starts a ripple.
That's what's up. That was another theme for the year. So that's what's up.
There you go. So hopefully, like I said, we'll answer some people's questions. And if this got one person to be an ally, then our job is done. We started with one, then they do another one, and it goes on and on and on. So I really appreciate everybody coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.